This is Counterpoint, and I'm your host, Tanya Granick-Allen. It seems the entire planet has election fever. And certainly, while the United States elections always dominate headlines, there are several elections recently had or underway in the EU, which are important to note. In the European Parliament elections, several countries saw a surge in votes for right-wing parties. Germany, Italy, and France all have a large increase in the number of seats held by right-wing parties. France's result was so shocking that President Macron called a snap election mere days before the Paris Olympics are set to start. Belgian Prime Minister Alexandre De Croo announced his resignation after his party, Open VLD, was defeated in European elections by more right-leaning ones. The UK is the outlier, perhaps, with the Labour Party securing a massive victory over the incumbent Conservatives recently. Is Europe experiencing, though, a shift towards the right? What should we make of these recent elections? What does it mean for us here in North America? Well, joining me now to help unpack these issues and the recent European elections is Adam Zivo, columnist with the National Post, and Peter Roff, contributing editor for Newsweek magazine. Thank you both so much for joining me. I appreciate your time. Peter, why don't you start us off? Perhaps give us, the Smith or Coles Notes version on what happened with the European elections for those of our viewers who may not be as familiar.
Well, as far as Euro policy is concerned, there was a pronounced shift to the right. The right-wing parties in Germany, Italy, France, England did exceedingly well in the all-Europe elections. As things have been progressing through with domestic elections, things have turned out not to sustain, but to produce some otherwise interesting results. Centrism in France, as represented by Macron, has been rejected. Based on the results of the EU elections, people were expecting Marine Le Pen and her right-wing party to take a majority in parliament. That didn't happen. The left-wing parties ended up taking a majority in parliament. So Macron has been effectively neutered. In England, interestingly enough, the result is deceptive. Labour won a huge landslide, but only because apparently Nigel Farage's Reform Party and the establishment Tory party split the Conservative vote. Had there not been a Reform Party candidate contesting many of the seats in Parliament, you likely would have had what is effectively known as a hung parliament, one where the majority is not large enough to really do anything, which is also the situation in France. What you have ongoing may be a kind of Brexit fever sweeping continental Europe, that individual nations are rejecting the leadership and dictates coming from Brussels, particularly but not exclusively on immigration, as a way to preserve their sovereignty, as a way to stop further integration. And that's something that's very much reflected in the sentiment of the American right in the upcoming U.S. presidential elections as well.
And so I want to talk on immigration when we come back from the commercial. We have about 45 seconds, Adam, if you want to chime in here. You spent a lot of time in Ukraine at the front. The Ukraine-Russia war has become a huge issue in my mind. In your observation, do you feel that played into a lot of the discussion we've seen in Europe going on?
I think so. I think many centrist European parties failed to explain to voters why supporting Ukraine is relevant to their national security interests. And as a result, many voters who felt cost of living issues began to lose faith in these parties and felt like it was a war that wasn't relevant to them. And that lack of knowledge was then exploited by parties on both the far left and far right, leading to the splintering that we see today.
Okay, I want to pick up more of that conversation when we return from this commercial break. Please stick around.